Hey everybody, this is Carl back again for another comic book spoiler review, continuing on with the X-Men line. And today we'll be doing Cable, Messiah War. This is 25 issues, written by Duane Swierczynski, and actually 3 artists here: Mike Choi, Ariel Olivetti, Clayton Cran. Some opinions about the art in this, but we'll get to it in a minute. But like always, going to start off with going through the X-Men characters' abilities. Before we get into that, though, please, if you be so kind to leave a like, comment, share this with your friends. Follow me and subscribe to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/talkativecarl, my Twitch, as I stream video games live, or just do general live streams on twitch.tv/talkativecarl. Follow me on my Patreon, patreon.com/talkativecarl, where you can put in certain suggestions for reviews that you think it will be interesting for me to check out. And I had a brain fart just then. Tier list is very affordable, and if you want to financially support the channel, yeah, you can just subscribe to maybe the $1 tier. That's perfectly fine. Follow me on my Twitter at talkativecarl, my Instagram Carl_Maxi1988 with the slash at the end. Links all in the description below. And I'm still gathering questions for my Hot Ones challenge video that I'll be doing next month. So I'm collecting questions, so send them in through my Twitter or any of the comment sections under any of the YouTube videos, so I can start piling them up. Anyway, Cable. Last time I did a comic book with a solo Bishop story. Now we'll do the other futurist Cable, Nathan Summers, the son of Cyclops and Jean Grey / Madeline Pryor clone of Jean Grey. Yeah, that it's a whole screw up with Mr. Sinister trying to make a ultimate mutant to combat Apocalypse and stuff like that. So it's a whole thing. Way back in the 90s and early 2000s, it was super complicated, but thankfully, because the comic book industry don't do many of these, but eventually they simplified it for the general, especially new comic book readers moving forward. That simple thing here, he is just Scott and Jean's son. That is it. Don't need to overcomplicate it beyond that. So Cable is an alpha level mutant. He is essentially like his mother, telekinetic, but he, as an infant, he was infected by the techno-organic virus from the future. That's why you always see Cable with a metal arm and the stuff creeping up over to the side of his neck, because he's a very powerful telepath, but he had to put the bulk of that power into staving off that infection, because it will left unchecked, it will eventually turn him into a full-on cyborg kind of situation. So he has your generic kind of psychic abilities: telepathy, psychomimicry. Cable's younger counterpart is able to glean psychometric readings off of objects with tactical contact. Illusions, telepathic cloak, mind link, telepathic camouflage. You'll think it's probably the same thing. Mind control, mind trap, mind possession, mind alteration, mind amnesia, precognition, psionic shield, psionic blast, astral projection, mental detection, telekinesis, which includes things like initiative aptitude, can disassemble complex devices explosively, separating every last component such as screws, nuts, circuit boards, etc., and just as quickly reassemble complex devices. Techno-active manipulation. Nathan learned from Amelia Vaught that through his use of his TK to manipulate the virus swimming through his biology, that can be manipulated foreign techno-organic substance to a similar degree. Matter transmutation, ability to alter molecular and subatomic structures, both in his own techno-organic components, though this may be a function of telekinesis as opposed to a discrete superhuman power. And the very chemical variances in the objects, i.e. changing food into poison, turning iron into pure gold, moving oxygen molecules to cause asphyxiation, transforming a man into a hideous man bat, or even changing the dermal layer of another's hand into glowing algae. Disintegration, psionic spikes, size increase, regeneration, and healing. At the peak of his power as Soldier X, Nathan has showcased vast biological capabilities such as regenerating himself and or healing others of malignancies or bodily damage at an accelerated rate. Like after getting shot in the head twice, as well as healing his body after getting cut through by semi-automatic gunfire. The size increase, he has his telekinesis alter his physical stature to that of a towering giant, similar to Apocalypse, which I never seen him do before. Force field, concussive blast, tactile telekinesis, flight, teleportation, remote teleportation, time traveling, because he has like a device in his arm that allows him to body slide or just teleport from one point in time to another. And you watch anything with Cable in it or read any comics with Cable in it, and if he says something like body slide by 2, that means instructing the device to teleport in 2 bodies. Techno-organic physiology. Much of Cable's body has been infiltrated and altered by the techno-organic virus, which has taken the form of cybernetics and bionics, meaning he is a cyborg. The primary infection resides in Cable's left side. As a consequence of his telekinetic guidance and his ability to control his own physical substance, Cable's entire body has been heavily fortified down to the cellular level, rendering superhuman strength to an unknown degree, as well as superhuman level of resistance to physical harm. While he was injured in combat with the Hulk, the injuries were not nearly as severe as they should have been, especially in light of the fact that he was suffering from the effects of the TO virus getting out of control. His entire skeletal structure has been replaced by porous, marrow-filled organic metalloid bone replacements that do not interfere with the creation of electrolytes or red blood cells. Superhuman endurance, speed, agility, dexterity, cybernetic eye, which permits Cable to see deep into the electromagnetic spectrum, cybernetic arm, energy projection, cybernetic restoration. He's a master combatant, highly accomplished warrior, battle strategist, highly adept in many forms of hand-to-hand combat, and in the use of a variety of weaponry, both from the modern era in the late 37th to early 39th century. Gifted intelligence, Cable has a diploma in law and is also in possession of an education provided by Clan Askini, which is far in advance of modern era conventional education, especially in the sciences. Weaknesses, mind interconnection. The the minds of Cable and Nick Gray are interconnected, causing them great pain when they are in close proximity to each other. Then, of course, the TO virus. Yeah, so that is like a rundown of Cable's capabilities. Very powerful in his right. He's just not an Omega level mutant to the degree of like Magneto or Storm. That, because powers doesn't infect the entire globe. But he's not somebody you want to screw with. Anywho, now, hey, what's up, Angel? How you doing? Like, Kenneth? Kenny? So anyway, first and foremost, before we really get into it, oh hey man, Easy33, like first time chatter, welcome man. Yeah, man, the art in this, I want to start off by saying right away, it started off really good, but throughout this adventure, this 25 issue adventure, Cable, who's looking after Hope Summers, the messiah of the mutant population, after the events of House of M, when Scarlet Witch went crazy, neutralized all but like 1% of the mutant population of having abilities. So most, only like the certain amount of X-Men and a few of the X-Men's rivals have their mutant abilities. All the other people who were mutants are human now. So Hope Summers was the first mutant born, and of course at this point in time they didn't really named her Hope Summers. You learn through this adventure how Cable gave her that name, but Hope is the first mutant born after the events, because for all anybody knew, there wasn't gonna be any mutants left, like they're gonna be extinct. And at that point in time, I remember that, the story, not thoroughly, because eventually I will cover House of M, because I'm just going through the individual certain members and certain enemies, but eventually I'll go through the teams and eventually certain iconic storylines like House of M. And after the aftermath, because Scarlet Witch is incredibly powerful, but she wasn't powerful enough to wipe off the mutant powers across the board. There's 1% she could not, affect, because she wasn't like God or nothing. So the humans were like, at least the racist humans were ecstatic, like, oh wow, we don't have to worry about mutants anymore. All we gotta do is wait like 2-3 decades and they'll just wipe themselves, they'll just go extinct and we don't have to worry about it no more. And the mutants are worried. It's like, oh my god, our essentially it's like what like the colonizers did to like the Native Americans and Hispanic cultures. It's like darn near put them to extinction, and it's like now it's like, oh my god, what we're going to do? But as soon as Hope was born and was detected that she was a mutant, she had to be protected. So Cyclops charged Cable to keep her safe, go to the future, protect her, raise her, make sure she's prepared, and then come back so she can be essentially the Jesus of the mutant population. And I will cover Hope Summers' story, because she has her own solo thing that I want to cover. That'll be the last solo X-Men story that I'll cover before I go into the team comic books. But she turns out to be an ultimate badass, thanks to Cable. But Cable, this story is pretty much like, if you read it's very John Connor, Terminator kind of situation. I wouldn't say John Connor, it would be like a Kyle Reese and Sarah Connor situation, more to be more apt. And there's a moment with there's a little bit of Alien mixed in too. So very James Cameron stuff going on throughout this entire storyline, which you'll see. But it's like if Kyle Reese had to protect Sarah by going into the future to escape from a Terminator, which the overarching enemy of this story is Bishop, which I covered his like solo thing last time. So it's only natural I follow up with Cable. So Cable is in like 2043, 44, something like that. He traveled to the future protecting this baby, and it's pretty much like Mad Max land at this point in the future. And he has only one goal in mind because he's a soldier. He's following like specific orders, and his dad gave him like specific orders to like protect this kid at all costs. She's too important for the future, but along the way he's had to escape from the clutches of Bishop, because I don't know what story led him to. It's probably something that happened, you know, very prior to this storyline. But Bishop gets different information in his timeline, where, because way back in the day, Cable and Bishop come from two different forking timelines, or at the very least, well, I like to say it's forking timelines because it's assumed that I don't know who was further in the future, Nathan or Bishop, but Bishop's timeline, his his apocalypse, because Cable comes from like his overarching enemy has been like Apocalypse, because he comes from the age of Apocalypse, kind of. Well, no, it's just like a future where Apocalypse kind of took over, and Bishop comes from an Apocalypse in the generic sense, where the Sentinels are pretty much like rounding people, mutants up, and humans, and try to eradicate most, you know, pretty much like a very techno advanced form of the Holocaust, essentially. These are two different timelines that these guys come from. But a Bishop's timeline is what he's led to understand, or somebody told him, where it went to crap because this kid grew up to turn it into crap. He thinks he did something that caused the other, you know, devastation of his future, and that's why he was raised in such like horrors of the future, such a dystopian. So he's like a Terminator. He is like on a mission to murder this kid, no matter what. And if he has to go through his former friends and teammates and just civilians, he has no, you know, qualms of doing that. As many times throughout this adventure, he just like, you know, murdering a lot of people to get in his way, even though he tells them to get out of my way. He just, you know, takes them out, and he's rationalizing like, well, this timeline shouldn't exist anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Or, well, once I killed this kid, all this wouldn't exist, and you know, you might exist in a better timeline, or you might not exist at all. Either way, it won't matter. Because I'm making a better future, preventing this kid from growing up. And it's almost like reminiscent to like Deadpool 2, where Cable goes back in time to try to kill the fat kid in Deadpool 2, Fire Fist. So Cable is wandering the streets, and he's, you know, trying to get like he's trying to get mugged by these you know, desert sand country bumpkins that like trying to like get pay your toll. And it's like he's just like because he's an expert military strategist, he knows where all they at. Like it's kind of amateur hour for him, but he's still getting nicked because by a stray bullet because you know he had to protect this kid, and it's like it felt like he's getting sloppy because he should be wiping out these guys at all costs. But it's like, you know, okay, I got my focus is kind of like off slightly a bit. So he goes to this diner where he sees Bishop there, and here's another thing I really don't care for, because the art I mentioned, like, I don't care for because it's not consistent. And I get the point where it's like anytime they travel in different time periods, there's the different artists involved, and a few of the art I like, but there's the other half I do not like. And I would have sacrificed the good art that I saw for, at the very least, a consistent art. Whether I liked it or not, I would prefer it to be consistent. I get the point I think they was trying to do, but it is too jarring sometimes, and I don't think it was very needed. It's kind of, if you ever saw the Spider-Verse movie, either the first one or the more recent one that just came out, which I reviewed up on my channel, so you can check it out on my YouTube channel. But I'm like, that was a more of that felt more organic for me in the films, because these different universes operate on a different kind of like signature, or just like, it makes sense the art will probably be different. This, you're only traveling through different time periods, so it wouldn't really make much sense as to why the art has to change every time you go through different time periods. But also the narration boxes also flip-flop between certain people, mostly between Bishop and Cable, whenever you change like the POV. And you learn how Bishop, after he gets his arm torn off after his first battle with Cable, because he was trying to get the kid in the first place, and Bishop tried to beat him to it. Some creature snagged off his arm, allowing Cable to escape with the girl. So he goes to the X-Men Forge's laboratories, knocks him out, takes a cybernetic arm that and tools around with it to have like a time device inside, so that way he can eventually track down Cable. But then after going through the investigation, and because he's like a military tactician himself, he follow the clues, figure out that he went to this diner this point in time, so I want to travel back a day before, so I can head him off. So here he is, like, standing in the diner and just shooting at Cable. Cable, of course, is like, easily, evades and protects the kid. So now they're having this kind of fight, and because there's no police, there's like local militia going on running things now, because it's kind of, like I said, it's kind of like very Mad Maxian kind of landscape at this point in the future, and they're all trying to stop this fight, which they end up knocking out Bishop after Cable narrowly escapes. Bishop tossing a semi, or not a semi, but just like a truck at Cable, and Cable's rescued by this waitress at the diner named Sophie, who plays a decent part in this adventure, but you only see her like a couple of time streams. So while she's nursing him back to health, you learn the whole situation with like Bishop trying to get that kid, and Cyclops in the meantime, and the team in the present are, because at this point in time Charles Xavier is not around, Jean Grey's not around. Cyclops is hooking up with Emma Frost at this point, and they're running the show at the X Mansion, and he's worried what like Bishop will do, because like he betrayed all of them. He's like, going after this innocent baby that is the key to their future. So he sets up a plan with Hank McCoy to use these kind of like nanobots, kind of like a fishing line or something like that, where the typical, like, using like the information from Forge's lab, they send out some kind of like a mini nanobot probe things, where anytime Bishop shows back up to the present for any reason, it immediately picks him up, and no matter where he jumps to, they can supposedly be able to not necessarily track him, but they pretty much can like know where he's at anytime he's in the present, and they can just convene immediately, which they can easily set up like a trap. And Sophie helps out with Cable with like making sure nursing his wounds, and of course Cable's like extremely protective of this kid. He cannot let anybody touch this kid. Nobody lays hands on his kid. He freaks out anytime it's like, I got him, one directive that serves above all else. In a way, it kind of runs parallel to what you see with Bishop. They both are military men. They have an objective, and that single objective that was instructed with supersedes anything else, and that's what puts them so at odds with each other. There is no talking with it, and that's what it makes, because more often than not, it gets on a lot of people's nerves when you see two clearly known superheroes fighting each other for no explicable reason. This here is like a good example of having a legit reason for these two to be button heads, because they establish, because Hope is pretty much like in a MacGuffin, a walking MacGuffin of this story, but she's a MacGuffin with a purpose, and that purpose is to Cable and the X-Men is of a force for good, while Bishop sees her as a force for future evil. This whole thing about nature versus nurture kind of situation. And Sophie sees the way like Cable operates, thinking like, oh, you can help us with like our issues here, because you can lead us and we can fight back with like the people who are there's still some kind of super rich hierarchy technically at this point in time, but Cable's like, yeah, that's not my mission. And it's like, I can't sit back and help you. She's my priority. But along the way, they meet up with Sam Guthrie, aka Cannonball, who's now an older man, and he's using this proto mini Cerebro to help find Cable and Hope, and he gives Cable like the keys to his where like the former like housing, like some kind of like, not the X Mansion, but another kind of like little mini base of operations where the X-Men kept like a lot of like tools and a Blackbird, which don't know why Cable, they were about to just use that to get away. But also, if you're wondering why, like, oh, why can't you just go back in time and avoid all this? He could have just gone back in the present at any point if he wanted to, because during that first fight, Bishop ended up damaging Cable's time device, which, now I'm thinking about it, at any point along the future when there's some kind of technological, because there is a point when he's with a technological civilization, still technically in a dystopian, but they clearly should have tools for help him fix his maybe albeit a little clunky, but at least fix it to a point where he can start going back at any point in time of his choosing, with more accuracy. But at this point, he's only able to go into the future. He cannot go into the past at any point. So while Sam is keeping Bishop distracted, and you know, Bishop trying to avoid the fight in the first place, but he ends up killing Cannonball. Now, keep in mind, while Cannonball is like going with his powers, he's pretty much indestructible. But as soon as he stop, it's like kind of like semi Juggernaut, where like Juggernaut is always kind of like impervious to like incoming damage, but especially when he's moving, Cannonball is pretty much indestructible only when he's moving. As soon as he stops, he's just as vulnerable as anybody else. So Cable uses some kind of cybernetic tentacle things in his arm to just punch a hole through his chest and rip out his heart. Very Mortal Kombat. But this buys Cable enough time to get away and form like a little armor around the baby, which is kind of dope looking, honestly. I was like, I want a pop figure. This was just like Cable with like hope, and it's like a little baby kind of armor. And also, this is very Mandalorian, if you think about it. This is like the Mandalorian before Mandalorian was even like a thing, or you just hope it's baby Grogu and or Baby Yoda, and clearly Cable is like Mando Din Djarin. It's very funny now I'm thinking about it. So it's so cool because like Cable's always seen with big guns, and he's like, very 90s, I know, but it just makes him even more badass when he's carrying like this big gun and sort of, just murking fools. Is so dope. Meanwhile, back in the present, Cyclops worry about his son and the kid. He arranges for the X-Force, Wolverine, X-23, Warpath, etc., to plan a trap for Bishop, which he easily springs. So that way they can finally capture him and interrogate him as to why he's doing what he's doing. And we later find out that why, like, every time we see Cable jump further into the future, like at least every couple of years, usually like bare minimum a couple of years, at the most maybe like 100 years, but the reason every time they jump is always some kind of terrible dystopian era of the future. There's no kind of like emerging of civilization and the growing populace to like to normalcy at any point in the future. Cable doesn't even see his own future along the way. Reason being that in the present, Bishop sets up in order to, because he tells like Cyclops like a story, like, hey, imagine like a tower that never ends, and you're chasing somebody, and they're ahead of you. And every time you get close, it just goes up another flight. They know they cannot go down. That's not an option. But you can go down, you can go up, you can go sideways. Doesn't matter. But the only problem is, they are always so out of your reach. So what do? Well, you go all the way back down and you burn the whole entire fucking building. So what Bishop did is he was instrumental in causing the devastation of a civilization for the futures that we'll see coming up through the story. where he sets up, these like secret, there's like secret devices in each country that kept hidden, that he discovered, that he ended up setting off, napalm. Europe, he sets off some kind of like uh 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 he sets off certain devastating devices affecting all but maybe like Antarctica, because it will pretty much handle itself, he said. So he's trying to make the world smaller for cable. There, you cannot just go anywhere in the future where it's like, ravaged to a certain degree, where it's like, okay, I got nowhere to hide in any other the country. So he had to maintain his locale to be in the U.S. So it makes it at least narrow things down for Bishop. So he sets up a trap for the X-Men where he doesn't kill them, but he sets off these kind of like when he sends like Wolverine and the X-Force to go search for this laptop where it signals his arm to release these kind of nanites that was breathable, that in 5 minutes, within 5 minutes of paralyzing pain for everybody but him in the X-Men HQ, he managed to escape. But then okay, they only last 5 minutes, but it's long enough for Bishop to get what he needs and get out. Because that was also part of his like plan to limit Cable's resources. And like everybody's like wanting to pound a flesh off of Bishop, because like he burned so many bridges, with the X-Men at this point in time. Like obviously things have changed, especially after the House of X, Powers of X, new status quo for the X-Men moving forward. So Cable, during this kind of reprieve where he's not being chased, he finds this kind of hidden farm village, akin to like that old legend about the Roanoke Native American village in North America that just disappeared off the map to this day, and nobody knows whatever happened to these people. It's pretty much like the same thing, where it's like a kind of like a bubble where to everybody else on the outside, it looks like it's like a regular kind of a barren field. So Cable walks in. He's met by these kind of like townsfolk or farmers, where he's brought in, taken care of, and met up with this redhead who is named Hope. So that's where Nathan decides to name the baby Hope Summers, because the kid eventually got a little older. This is a couple of years at this point went by, and she started to talk and everything like that. But she called Nathan Nene. It was kind of adorable. And this woman that Cable ended up hooking up with, man, she is like, it was like a bossy chick. It's like, he's trying to like, trying to have some kind of stabilization where it's like, okay, I'm here, I can put down some bitter roots until this kid grows up, and I'm in a blind's eye for Bishop, so it was no way for him to know where I'm at exactly. So I can rest up a bit and make sure I look after this kid in like a nice secure spot. And then she's like, barking orders at him, telling like about like how what he's doing and everything like that. Gotta do it right. Gotta chop this wood this way. Blah blah blah. And he just turns around like, you know, I'll get to work. We back the hell off. And it's like, you know, that alpha male kind of gets out, and it's like that quickly turned on. But you know, that's how they end up just being together. Because she was kind of like the woman in charge of that village. Then one day, these military folk just shows up into the spot after two men ran inside trying to escape from them. And it turns out these armored soldiers are like these cockroach people. And it turns out these were formerly U.S. military people, but because of what Bishop did for the futures from the present day era, well, he didn't set it off in the present day era. He like systematically had them set off at certain points to where by the time Cable shows up, they all turn to crap. At one point, it got so bad where like all the other countries try to convene on the U.S. and you know, and of course the UN is like, yeah, we understand. You come, you know, you can seek asylum here in the U.S. because we understand, like, you know, Europe is in catastrophe, like, you know, Asia, Africa, everybody, y'all in trouble. Any survivors, you can come here. And of course, these are like these kind of like, you know, you can quantify them as like those kind of I wouldn't use the term right wing, but you know, those kind of type of people that's like, you know, this is our country. You don't let these people into, you know, our borders, blah 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 kind of attitude. These are those type of people that, you know, because it's like a whole thing where like, you know, cockroaches can survive anything. They merge with some kind of cockroach DNA kind of thing of Bob, and then they turn to these cockroach people, and they trying to like turn other people into one of them. And Cable is trying like, okay, because most of his tools were buried. I don't know why he buried them. He could just hid them away somewhere you can have quick access. But he was initially wanting to just take the kid and get the hell out. But thanks to Hope, it's like, you know, encouraging him like, hey, we gotta save she sees her as her mother. We gotta say mom. And it's like, and then of course he's like, through the mouth of babes, he like, okay, we gotta save her before she ends up being turned into these monsters. And you can't even cut these guys' heads off because they're still functioning. And so the best way is to like rip off their torso to keep them from kind of like, you know, breathing and stuff like that. So he ends up saving the mom, or the surrogate mom, and then escaping out of the after they, you know, killed quite a few of these creatures. They managed to escape out of the bubble, but in an ensuing kind of gunfight, she ended up getting caught by a stray bullet into the chest, which is kind of devastating. And of course, little Hope sees that, and it's like, I imagine that's scarring. But this kid is going through, like, every time they go through a certain, because she was too young to acknowledge what's going on while she was a baby. But this is her first, you know, witnessing of war and battle. And her first, you know, taste of blood would be when one of these stray cockroach soldiers who informs Cable about what had happened to the world, and you know, Cable got wind of like, okay, this is obviously probably Bishop was doing, and it was little Hope who takes Cable's knife and just jabs it into the abdomen of this creature, which allows adult Hope and Cable to escape his clutches and neutralize him. All right, this is the part where it's like, the art gets, because this is part of the least. I do not like this art style at all. It's at the very least, I may not like this art style, but if it was this art style or the previous art style, either way, I would have rather it stay consistent rather than just jumping from one good art to a horrible art to a good art to a horrible art. But this is a couple of years later. Hope was a little older, probably like no older than maybe 10, like 17, like 8 and 10 years old. And Nathan is starting to teach her, show her about chess. Don't know where to get a freaking chessboard from, and he just looking after him. But then start teaching her, of course he taught her little words about how to say her name and say his name, but he eventually had to tell her about, because he was hesitant for a while to tell her about what are mutants, and the time that she was born and that they have to go back to. It's like trying to make sure he waits until she's ready. It's kind of like I said, like a mix of Sarah Connor and John Connor rolled into one. But eventually he lets it slip about mutants, and then it's like, okay, I gotta tell this kid because she's probably a couple of years away from manifesting her powers, so I'm gonna have to break it down to her. So it explains that mutants are a certain faction of people that when they hit puberty, their powers manifest. And she's like, of course she's a young kid, she's super excited, like, oh my god, wolf, I make things explode. And it's like, because she doesn't know what her powers will be. No one will know where their powers will be until they manifest. But of course, in case you don't know, Hope's powers is similar. It's just mimicry and enhancing other mutants' powers. It's pretty much like an advanced form of what Rogue does, like a very advanced form of what Rogue does. She doesn't need to touch anybody. She just need to be in proximity or see a mutant using their power. So she sees Cyclops using his Octa Blast. She can use it probably more effectively than even him, even without her knowing how it will necessarily operate. But it only works on mutants, because it doesn't work with anybody else's abilities. Like she doesn't see Spider-Man and starts, wall crawling like him. It doesn't work that way. It has to be mutants. But at this point, any water they probably have or rations they have, most of it's been used up, and she's the priority, so she gets most of the stuff. And of course, he's pretty much getting dehydrated. He faints somehow with a stroke of freaking luck. She spots some kind of a bunker where there's where they kind of use their people who already died in there, their skeletons at this point, found these containers where they try to convert their pee into drinkable water. And she learns from Cable these little powder things where it can tell you whether or not it's good drinking water or not, and if it remains clear, it's drinkable. Oh, and also, if you're wondering about what happened to the cockroach people, well, they didn't jump for it in time right away. They stayed a couple of years in that point in time with other military personnel who's trying to stave off these these cockroach insectoid creatures. And they're scientist guys come up with a massive bomb that would eradicate these creatures on a cellular level, through like a very wide area to make sure they got them. The only problem is we'll also kill the people there. And of course, Nathan's not with that because how important the girl is, but everybody else is like, no, we gotta stop these creatures, otherwise they'll just ravage this entire planet. So Cable decides to take the girl and jump for 100 years, long after this is, because they're about to set it off. So any kind of fallout would have already been dissipated at this point. So by the time they went to the future, there's a barren wasteland, skeletons scattered, but there was like no life. It's like animals, for them to like trap and eat, or drinking water. Even the rain at this point in time isn't even drinkable. That's how she knows about what's clean water and what's not. So they go forward a little further, and that's where they are right now. Of course, Hope doesn't like going through time because it makes her throw up, which is a hilarious little continuing joke that she, for a while, that she keeps constantly puking on him. So she makes sure she gives Cable some drinking water so he can don't dehydrate to death. Along the way, this kind of a middle of this adventure is like a tie-in to this X-Force adventure with Deadpool, where they're trying to take down Strife and Apocalypse, along with Archangel. I don't know the ins and outs because it's the bulk of this kind of story is mainly in like an X-Force story, and this is essentially like a tie-in to that. Bishop ended up teaming up with Strife, who is the clone twin of Cable, thanks to Apocalypse, who's like essentially evil Cable. And Bishop teams up with Strife in order to get his hands on the kid so he can finally kill her. Of course, he doesn't tell Strife everything because he's wondering why he is able to keep things from Strife, even though he has the same powers as Cable. He has to constantly, with this kind of trick where if you're trying to outmaneuver a psychic, you gotta think about other things or too many things mixing up with your fantasies with the real thing, just so they cannot sift through what's true and what's not. That's how when Bishop was being interrogated by Cyclops and Emma Frost, he's trying to drown her out by mixing his truth memories with fabricated fantasies, so that way she cannot really pinpoint what's what. I don't know how they end up, the X-Force time travel to the timeline where Cable is. Like I said, it's probably in the bulk of the story is in like a X-Force story. But Wolverine is I don't know, uncharacteristically lecturing Cable about you failed your mission, man. You supposed to bend back. We were waiting on you. Oh, what the heck have you been doing? You've been spinning your wheels, and and this is the first time I actually got to say, it's F you, Logan. You don't know what this guy's been doing, and you get the nerve to lecture him. You wasn't with him every second of every day. You know Cable well enough to know that he has a plan and he's doing what he needs to do. You shouldn't really be questioning anything he's doing. So it's man, that is just and of course, Cable just punched the hell out of Logan, but of course got those metal bones. It's really don't do squat. But after that little adventure with dealing with Strife and getting Hope back from his clutches, Hope wants to go back with the X-Men because that's what she's been told about them, and like, hey, I want to go to that timeline, want to be with them. It's like no, you're not ready, and she's fighting them because she's a petulant kid at this point, despite being like, smart as a whip. She's still like immature little girl. So she's fighting, kicking and fighting him while they're trying to time travel. She ends up falling 2 years away from where Cable is supposed to land. So there's like it's 2 far off cities, and she ends up going to one to try to hide away and wait for Cable, because that's what she thinks he would do. But she's wrong, because he ends up doing, like, thinking about the opposite. It's like, okay, please, kid, don't tell me you went to these cities that, probably is too dangerous for you. But he ends up going there, and lo and behold, this is where, like, Bishop who is going by Archbishop here, who is still working for Strife at this point, trying to find this kid, and he's letting people think like, oh, this is my student that I gotta search for. She's very special to me, kind of thing. Lying through his teeth. And this is a part of the technological, even though it's still a dystopia around the surrounding area, this still has like a functioning city. And I'm surprised, while Bishop is here, I guess he doesn't have the time, but he could have gotten some tools where he can fix his time device so he can, go back whenever he wants to. That's one of my kind of problem here is, like, as far as narrative wise. But Hope ends up bumping into one of the military general's sons named Emil, who at this point is narrating through this kind of arc that Hope is on. And it's like, God, I do not care about this kid. Why are we following this kid or care about what this kid thinks? And he narrating spots where he doesn't know, or he wasn't privy to, and it's kind of weird. I know it happens sometimes in stories, but it's just like you weren't there in moments when Cable is outside the city that you haven't met until like part way when he's already in the city and things are going pear-shaped. But he is smitten with this girl, and they got a little crush, and he's secretly feeding her like food. And he's at this point in time is very like Anne Frank, hiding her away from the military of the city and the Archbishop. Even though he looks up to the Archbishop, he cares for her a little bit more. And of course, she's hesitant at first, but she starts to warm up to Emil over a period of time. And this part, it's like, yeah, the art in here is so staggering every once in a while. It's like they need to keep maintain. And this part, Bishop kind of looks like a combination of Nick Fury and Blue Marvel from the Marvel Comics. And it's like he doesn't even look like Bishop at this point, at least in this panel. And he's still like gung-ho about like killing his kid. He's like not giving up. No matter how long it takes, he's gotta neutralize his kid. And I hope it's getting a little bit older. There's a couple of years, difference where she eventually will reconvene with Cable. And the art, I don't know what was the decision here. They trying to make her, clearly she's like in her early teens, which at this point her power should be manifesting at this point. She should be reaching like she should be like like 13 or 14 at this point, but she has like a face like she's like in her 20s for some reason. At least how I'm looking at the art. And she eventually meets up with Cable. They hijack this spaceship they was going to use to escape this, what they saw as like a doomed planet, so they can terraform a brand new planet with like crops and everything like that. They escape on it. Bishop, along with Emil, follows them, and Emil finds Hope, but she lets her know that Bishop's been lying because he's been chasing her for years, trying to kill her. And of course, during this whole situation, here come the Brood. Who are the Brood? They're pretty much based off the xenomorphs from the Alien films. The only difference is they make more Brood not through like chest bursters, but laying, or at least going those face hugger things. They got these little tongues that they strike at the base of your neck, where they lay eggs through there, and that's how more Brood sprout forth. Very gross. Probably more grosser than what the aliens do, or the xenomorphs, as I say. And Cable and Bishop, on two opposite ends of this ship, try to fight off these things, and Hope doesn't want to leave her friend Emil because she really likes him. And of course, it's like those little schoolboy crushes. Like, I don't know, it was very fast. I didn't really care much for it. I mean, we all can get it. We all had those kind of school early crushes and stuff like that. And it's fair to say they kind of warm up to each other to the point, because it's been 2 years. It's long enough to form a kind of bond where you don't want to leave them behind to face devastation with these aliens. But one of the aliens, and Bishop, talking about scumbag, he ends up convincing the Brood Queen, because they track down this kind of powerful mutant power signature. They don't know who it is, but it clearly is Hope they're tracking. And in lieu of getting taken over by or again harvested by the Brood, he says, like, I will deliver you to this power signature that you're looking for if you just let me go. And so the Queen wasn't stupid. I'm kind of glad it was wrote this into this narrative. It's like, okay, yeah, we'll keep, we'll attach a Brood to your base of your skull, so that way I can still monitor you, but you'll still have your overall functions, so you can lead us to this source. So it's like, wow, you are a scumbag. I was expecting at least a mini truce between Cable and Bishop, because they know how horrific and a nuisance the Brood can be. But like, nah, it's like, if it means bumping off this kid, like, he'll do whatever. He already teamed up with Strife. Like, what's the Brood? He'll probably team up with like somebody like Sinister or Apocalypse if it means neutralizing this kid. Heck, I imagine he will even team up with somebody like Red Skull if it means neutralizing this kid. So Hope eventually finds Emil, and Emil's like, Cable, let's escape through these two pods. Somehow there's only two pods, but of course these pods were meant to like use to like start the terraforming to regrow like vegetation and fruits and stuff like that. But it's only can fit two bodies. But so she wasn't gonna leave Cable behind because she considered him like her father. So Cable manages to make it back to the ship, because Bishop has this little device on his cybernetic arm. You would think it's like a stunt, but it's got like a little device hooked up there where it's kind of like a massive explosion that will, because the only reason he doesn't just snipe the kid or leave it to a chance, he is like, no, before I set this off, which will end up killing me, but it doesn't matter, I want to look at this girl in the eyes knowing that she will go down with me, because I want to make sure the deed is done. Even if it means my own death, the deed has to be done. I have to be sure. So he needs to track this girl down before he sets off the device. And he ends up pitching a ride on these space whale things, which you see in my, which I talk about in my 90s X-Men, I think it was in like a season 4 review. Excuse me, a review where these little space whale things that show up that Bishop eventually hits the ride on to escape the exploding ship. But while all the other crew members are getting attacked by the Brood, Bishop shows up, and Emil realizes, like, you know, it's important that, you know, she is safe. So he has Cable go into one of the pods while she's in the other pod, and they're pretty much in like a hyper sleep until they land in on the planet. But you know, Cable's like, you know, the other pod can, you know, big enough to fit both of you. He's like, he was like, no, it's like, you know, I gotta make sure that she is safe and secure. Just tell her that, you know, I love her. Cable's like, I will. He doesn't. They never even brought it up. Not out of a malicious way, but just like they didn't write that part in about like when they land on the planet, like, hey, like this guy, you know, really cared about you. They didn't bring that up again. Like I said, Emil meant nothing. It might mean something to you if you read this. I'm already more than halfway through this story. It's like, okay, you might get something out of this Messiah War arc with Cable, because it is pretty good. Very, like I said, very James Cameron. It's like James Cameron was writing this. But he managed to take Bishop's explosive device, and Bishop managed to escape out before he pressed it, and not only kills him and the people on board, but also all the Brood that's on there. And when Cable and Hope land on the planet, they've been like hypersleep for a couple of years extra before, because they traveling through space as they're, you know, marking the pods are marking their course to the planet Earth. She's a little older now, and she's probably like hard to say. It's probably like getting close to like somewhere between 16 and 18 at this point. And she's, you know, telling him like, oh, like I'm ready. Well, you know, of course, eventually Bishop makes it to the planet, and the Cable managed to get the device fixed, his time device fixed, not perfectly, but every time he's trying to travel through time, he's getting closer to like the timeline that he wants, but he goes back in the past, like 1614, and back to the future. They end up circling back to 2044 when like he sees Sophie again, but running like her own militia at this point, after events of what happened earlier in the arc. But you know, you go into the the American Revolution, and then like the 40s, and of course, like Hope is eventually like, you know, maneuvering around like she's like an expert combatant. Like, how are you moving around, jumping around like so expertly, like you've been taught this? And it's like, I like to think it's because her mutant abilities are slowly starting to formulate. Because here, every so often you see Hope doing certain things, mimicking the mutants around her, which is eventually like Cable and then Bishop. And she's, I guess you can say she's maneuvering around because that's what Cable does, but that's like a natural thing that he honed. That's not like a power, but whatever. Eventually they go back to the 40s, and of course they don't have their normal weapons, the future tech. They getting guns from these different eras, like, you know, you see Bishop with like muskets and Cable with Tommy guns. I was like, oh god, this is like awesome. This is my favorite part. Just seeing Cable with a Tommy gun, just like going at it with Bishop in the 40s, and it's like, this is awesome. But eventually, they end up in the 70s. You see like little spots where they, you know, travel like 2024, 2019, 2014. And it's like, you know, it's like, you know, times that, you know, of course, this comic was made in 2008, so they kind of like, you know, just playing fast and loose with what the future might be. Of course, you know, 2019 was decent, not perfect, but they didn't know what 2020 was going to be. So they skipped all that. But then in 1979, and Hope is just looking in awe of like the structures. Nothing was devastated yet, and it's like, oh, this is like amazing. You know, it's like, you know, like people are like, you know, living like decent lives, and it's drinking functional and clean drinking water and breathable. Well, of course, it's always been breathable air, but it's like, but it's relatively cleaner, and you know, people are like, you know, happy. There's nobody's trying to shoot at each other every second. But then they eventually travel to 1990, and it's a little panel where it's like, you know, you're one decade and then the next decade, where you see like in the background, because they're in a subway, and each panel you see like cracks in the walls getting more, you know, like increasing as time goes by. So I thought it was like a nice touch. Whereas not as pristine as the 70s, but you see certain cracks forming, but it gets like more, it's like 80 than the 90s. There's like by the 90s, it's like a little bit more cracks. Then Hope was like, okay, I had it with this, and she started like, you know, because Bishop is like going at it with Cable, and she just like just had it. It's like she's jumping on top of him and trying to strangle this dude. It's like, you leave my dad alone, and she's trying to choke this guy out. It's like I had it, like, because she's trying to, at first she's trying to reason with him, like, I'm not gonna harm your future, I'm not like that. And it's like, you will be. So he's trying to go at it, you know, because she ended up using Bishop's own power against him because she's in his vicinity, so she sent out like an energy blast against him. But he's trying to, like, you know, use the energy thing to burst her skull, but thanks to Cable taking his time device and implanted it in Bishop's arm, because he's in the 90s, he's been here before, so he's comfortable just cooling here. So he implants it into Bishop's arm, which is already kind of like, you know, out of whack, but it sends him to 6700 AD into like a, you know, I guess the planet's about to become be destroyed when it's like a dying sun at this point. And Bishop just like I won't say reminiscing, but just contemplating, like, well, I failed, like, you know, like, I thought I was, you know, doing the right thing. I was doing the right thing, wasn't I? And so it's like, now he's kind of like, you know, at this point, at the end of his life, when he's about to be murdered by the dying star, it's like, man, like, was I doing the right thing? So Hope is taken to the X Mansion during the early formation of the X-Men, where she can finally, hone her skills a bit more. And this is where like the story technically ends. There's some kind of after like epilogue with like Deadpool and going over some stuff, but I didn't find that too interesting. But that's pretty much like the Messiah War. It's a very cool story. Like I said, it's very James Cameron, like Kyle Reese with like Sarah Connor trying to keep her safe from being murdered by a Terminator, pretty much. It's like a play on that in my mind, with like xenomorphs thrown into the mix. But yeah, Messiah War is a very good story. The only thing is like the art, the striking, jarring changing of the art along through the adventure, like I didn't care for. Just stay consistent with one art, in my opinion. I don't know what was going on behind the scenes where they had to alternate between artists, because it doesn't seem like it's like maybe it is like one artist got busy with something else at that time, and somebody else had to step in. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, it was a pretty good story. Could have left out the whole Emil situation. Didn't care about Emil and his little love crush thing he got going on, because he seems like a simp. And the changing of the narration boxes between Hope, Bishop, Emil, Cable, it's like, I mean, I get the point, but it's just like you could have just left that with maybe one comic book issue with Bishop narrating, seeing things through his point of view, so you understand like, okay, why he has to do what he has to do, and so you can better understand things. But you do it like every so often where it's kind of like, who are we really following? Because we should be mainly following the narration of Cable, mainly, and maybe one issue or two with narration by Hope here and there, was when she got a little older, which you do, but it's just like primarily we got to focus on Cable. This is his story technically. But anyway, that is Cable. The next comic that I'll be covering will be Domino, which is shorter. So that'll be the next X-Men related comic book that I'll be doing a review on. We'll be getting back into the X-Men movies to review at some point by halfway through the end of July, because this month we're covering Father's Day movies, primarily Indiana Jones stuff. I just did the first one, which is up on my YouTube channel, but also in July I'll be covering, for 4th of July month, I'll be covering the National Treasure movies and the Disney Plus mini TV show. But after that, I'll be getting back into the X-Men movies, which are only halfway through, so it's like, only got like 4 or 5 movies left. But in the meantime, I'm gonna be covering, I just wrapped up the X-Men 90s TV show, which you can see all 5 seasons of my thoughts on the show. Now I'm gonna be covering X-Men Evolution in those seasons, and after that it'll be X-Men and Wolverine and the X-Men. Then after that it'll be like the Wolverine anime season, and then the X-Men anime season. And then that'll be the wrapping up of those TV shows. But anyway, let me know in the comments below what you think of Cable as like a X-Men character, because he was the man back in the 90s, because he was so dope, honestly. Because he was created. Who was Cable created by? Was it Stan Lee? Oh no, it's Chris Claremont. Chris Claremont did a lot of Chris Claremont and Stan Lee are mostly the ones that created a lot of these X-Men characters. There's a few here and there that worked on other members of the X-Men along the way, but Chris Claremont and Stan Lee's probably like the highest ones. But anyway, I will see you all in like 10 minutes as I cover the new Transformers Rise of the Beast movie pretty soon. But anyway, I'll see y'all soon. Once again, keep sending in your questions for my Hot Ones Challenge video that I'll be doing next month. So I'm going to start stacking those up. So send those in as I'll try out the hot sauces live on Twitch for you guys. Anyway, I'll see y'all soon. Take care.